episode number 12 with Rob Heubeck. Rob, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Jake. It's good to be here finally.
First thing I want to do is just say thank you for everything you've done.
Yep.
You've been grinding all summer, all year. It is crazy that we're already at Thanksgiving, about to go home for a little bit or go back to our, a little bit of a break here.
Yep.
So
it's been good.
Yeah, I think things have gone well, and you guys did a great job. So
thanks.
I think I can speak on behalf of the community that you've done an awesome job.
Thanks for all your support and everybody else out there. It's been awesome.
Yeah.
Get us to Thanksgiving.
What's kind of your read on the community right now, the students, the teachers, and how everyone has handled these past couple of months of hybrid and, solely virtual to begin? Where are we right now, would you say?
Well, I mean, I think, it's interesting because when we were doing all this stuff in June, we were really thinking about three constituencies, right? The teachers, the kids, and the parents. And how were each of the three constituencies going to react to the things that we're trying to do? Obviously trying to make safety and the protocols first and foremost. That was the first thing we needed to make sure that we had in place. And then just figuring out how we could bring kids in and how we could teach kids who came in and also kids who stayed home, and how we could try to convince the community and to show the community that what we were doing was safe, and that they had, if they really wanted to bring their kids in and thought that, they were okay with it, that we could provide that safe environment. So, it was a long time coming. I mean, I would say we started this process back in May. Really we had to kind of deconstruct the entire upper school, right? From class schedules to coordination to, classroom space. We had consultants come in and give us kind of ideas on how many kids we could get into each room. We had the pure air purifiers come in. So we had so many different people who were involved in these conversations. And then on the other hand, we also were trying to help teachers cope with having to teach in a hybrid environment, right? Which was something that none of us have ever done, right? I mean, we jumped into the online stuff, through emergency in March, and we got through that, and now we're taking a different direction come August, which is okay. Now you got to be able to teach kids at home and kids in class at the same time. So we threw a lot at them, and on the other hand, of course, making sure that when the kids come in, they understand that they've got to do what we ask them to do, or we're not going to be here. So it's been a good ride. If you told me in May and June that we would be able to last until roughly Thanksgiving, I'd say, May, I'll take it. Right. And then we'll deal with the holidays when we get there.
So what are the conversations like coming up for the holiday break? And it's a tough time right now because the cases are skyrocketing everywhere and people are looking to travel, maybe a little hesitant to travel now. What are some of the factors you guys are discussing now as a group, as we have those 2-3 weeks in between Thanksgiving and the December holidays?
Well, I think what Thanksgiving, the challenge of Thanksgiving is that we're going to, each family is going to go off and do their own thing. And then you're going to add people to that equation, right? So brothers and sisters coming back from college, relatives that might be coming in from out of town in different states that have different numbers. Those are all things that we need them to be careful about. We also don't want them we can't tell them not to be with their families, right? Especially for people that haven't seen their families in a long time. So, our families have done an incredible job. Our parents have done an incredible job of giving us information when we need it, making sure our kids are following the protocols. We gave them, or we asked each parent to really kind of be true to our contract, our safety contract, and it's been an incredible. They've done a wonderful job, and we wouldn't have been able to stay open as long as we have without their cooperation. So, I think we've got. We are in the middle of COVID fatigue, COVID anger, on top of the winter coming, on top of an election, on top of all the subliminal things that we act on that we're not sure why. And those are all the things that we've got to try to be ready for. So, I don't know what's going to happen when we get back from Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. I mean, I hope we're here. We've proven we can be here safely, but we also know that the factors that will prevent that from happening are really out of our control.
Right. It's almost like a day by day decision process, similar to how it was over the summer, I'm sure.
Right. I mean, the challenge is you've got to plan for multiple scenarios, right? Yep. And that was the challenge in August July and August was, okay, what happens if this occurs or this occurs, right? We've got to, I mean, we could very well have not come back to school, right? Live. Right. And we would have, all that work we would have done, right? All the things that we would have done that we did actually to get ready, we may not have been able to implement, right? So, but that's what you have to do, right? You can't, this thing is just so unpredictable.
You can't just not prepare for it.
You have to have 3 or 4 or 5 scenarios that you've got to prepare for.
Right.
And pick which one.
Yeah. So for you and your conversations with the other administrators and school leaders, what has been kind of the hardest or most challenging factor to navigate? Probably just the day by day decision making in those conversations, but you talked about the 3 groups that are you have to manage. What group do you spend most of your time trying to cater to, maybe?
Yeah, I think the faculty for sure. I mean, we have the faculty are it's what makes Gilman, and we've got to make sure that we're providing an environment and we're providing the support that people feel that, look, I can come to school and I can do it safely. We've got 5 or 6 teachers that are remote for various reasons, very good reasons. But there are others here at school that were and still are skittish about being here, right? And so I think my job and the job of most administrators around the area is trying to create an environment where people feel that, okay, we're not going to put you in this place where you're going to risk your health, right? And that's not even talking about, the teaching part, right? That's not even talking about the professional part of being an educator.
It's walking in the door.
It's walking in the door and feeling safe and feeling comfortable that you can do all the things that we're asking you to do. So that's been the most challenging for me. And so, I think, I mean, you're here every day, and there are teachers that walk around, and they don't want to walk, they go from their classroom or their office to the bathroom, then they go back and they shut the door.
Yep. Stay in that small radius.
Stay in that small space. And if that's what they need to do to feel comfortable, then so be it.
One of the things I love about Gilman, just on a regular basis, when I first came here, was how much freedom you have to teach what you want to teach, to, pursue what you want to pursue, to have the types of relationships you want with each kid. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of freedom for our faculty. Right. And I think even in this situation, even with all the barriers that we have to navigate, teachers still have the freedom. If they feel more comfortable at home, great. Yeah. I mean, as long as you're doing what, you need to do, right. No one's going to give you any trouble for that. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we, I think what really in some ways has suffered in all this are those incidental touches that are really important to being a teacher and student at Gilman, right? I think if you have to weigh, right, are we willing to give up the incidental touches for an in-person experience, right? We'll take that. And I think what this has shown is that we've got to weigh things, right? And what's more valuable, right? I mean, you can't have everything the way it was before. So, if a faculty member feels comfortable staying in his or her office, but will teach, we'll take the teaching, right? We'll take the in-person teaching, because I think that's very valuable, and you can connect with kids that way. The social piece is really important. And, I think teachers are very focused on content, right? We've become a content-driven world here. And I think what hopefully COVID has done is maybe given some perspective to, content's important, but if you don't get to that book that you really have taught, or you don't get to that lesson, that's okay, because you've done a real service to the boys by being there and by having them be there, right? And we can't measure that yet, but I think day-to-day survival in some ways depends on that. Getting up and saying, I get to see my friends, I get to see my teacher, I get to see people.
Right. And we've talked about it before, just kind of checking in with the guys and making sure that they're doing all right. They're mentally okay, because I think underneath all of the coordination and the planning and the curriculum and, the activities and keeping everyone busy is that mental health component. And I think, that's probably the most important part, but maybe not the aspect of this whole situation that people talk about the most is the mental state of everyone.
Well, I hope, and maybe we can talk a little bit about this too, is what are we doing? What are you doing? Right? What am I doing to kind of get myself mentally in a good place outside of Gilman, right? Outside of this, because it's easy getting up, going through the same routine, right? Getting dressed, watching the news, coming to school, and doing the same thing over again, right? But there has to be a release for your mental state, right? And there's certain things that I've rediscovered, certain things that are, I'm going to commit to doing, and I'm just going to put the work down, right? So, I think it's really important that all of us find that outlet, and you stick to it and you make it a priority, or we're not getting through any of this.
Right. Exactly. You can't do what you do unless your brain is feeling okay. And
you got it.
Yeah. What are some things that you're doing to help you grapple with, everything that you have to do every day?
Yeah. So I think, I exercise. I've always done that. I've found a lot of just relaxation and exercise, which for some people is impossible, but sweating and working hard can put you in a state of,
got to get a sweat in.
Yeah. You got to get a sweat in. I think, rediscovering music that I hadn't listened to for a long time. That's been important. I'm a big Formula One fan, so I watch Formula One almost every Sunday morning.
Love it.
One of the things that got me through probably in March and April was horse racing. I love horse racing, and I do that quite a bit, and also watch a lot of UFC.
Yeah,
got into that, and then working outside. Working in the garden. Building certain things. I built an outdoor box for my television that I hang from the tree and put the chimney on and watch TV outside.
That's great.
Which is awesome. Running, Cesare would be happy to know, running Apple TV through my YouTube and beer and everything. So no cords.
Yeah.
Good connection. And when you got that, man, you got anything on TV.
Right.
I can watch UFC. I can watch Formula One. I can watch horse racing.
That's great. What do I need to do to get UFC in my? I need to get some more channels. I only have the basic ones.
You got to get ESPN Plus.
Is that where it is?
Yeah.
ESPN Plus.
Yeah,
okay.
and I think I don't want to advertise this too much, but you could probably talk to some students and figure out a way to get it.
Okay.
Without paying the $79.95.
I think I already do that. My sister pays for Netflix for our whole family.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And she's texting us every night, who's on my Netflix, because only one person can watch.
So unless it's the real big events where it's pay-per-view, all the undercards and all the other fight nights are through ESPN Plus.
Okay.
I think it's $5 a month. So it's you're spending that at the coffee shop probably.
Exactly.
Yeah,
well, that's what I do for my mental health is get a coffee,
Good.
You need it.
Good. Good.
Also, have you heard of Wim Hof breathing? I've been telling everyone about this.
Wim Hof breathing.
It's called Wim Hof breathing. I told my classes today about it too, because I do it. It's 11 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
It's just breathing in, breathing out. This guy tells you what to do.
Right.
And it makes your day 100% better after you do it.
I tried some of the meditation apps and, Calm and that kind of stuff. And I just can't get in the mental state of enjoying it. Right. I'm too fidgety.
Right.
And I'm thinking about too many things. I can't clear my mind.
Yeah.
So, I guess I do it watching, guys beat each other up or
Yeah.
Or
well, that's what my dad watches.
Or
that
horses, seeing if they finish, first or second.
Well, that's good too. Whatever
it takes. Everyone's got their own sense of calm.
Yep. Being outside, disconnecting.
Being outside. I've rode my bike a ton. I hike a lot. Not rediscovered, but spent a lot of time at Lake Roland, at the park, and also discovered across from what is the park off Shawan Road? I don't know. I can't remember. There's this kind of working farm that they put in. It's awesome, and just go up there and it's great. It's just that kind of stuff. Early Sunday mornings, my wife and I try to take a walk somewhere.
Yeah, and
we do that and take the dog and just kind of forget about what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely necessary, and I'm glad that everyone kind of has their own thing that they're doing. So if you can find that, I think it's crucial, because if you just wake up, do your job, watch the news when you get home, look at your Twitter feed, it's a dumpster fire.
It is. It's bad. It's really bad for you. So I don't know. I hope everybody finds something that they can choose as a form of relaxation.
For sure. And Rob, you're, in addition to everything you're doing at school with the administration, you're also teaching a class. And I read some of your comments, and I want to take this class. I mean,
feel free.
It's
third period, even day.
It sounds amazing. Is this a senior elective?
Yeah. So the class, I don't even know what the official title is. It's essentially Intellectual History of Western Europe. And I taught this course when I first came to Gilman. I taught AP European history, and at that point we were kind of phasing out of APs in the history department. And so once the AP class left, and I thought, well, look, I've got an opportunity for electives. So I taught a year elective just called Intellectual History. And it's interesting. That was that course, and there's a lot of firsts in that course, right? It's kind of like European Civ on steroids, in that we dug deeper into some of the thinkers of the Western world, and didn't necessarily go into antiquity, but that was the first class that Gilman ever offered where kids used iPads, right? So every kid was issued an iPad in that class, and we moved a couple apps on there, like still use Notability. I've rediscovered Notability, which is phenomenal on an iPad. I
don't have Notability.
Well, you should get it. It's phenomenal. I mean, you can annotate PDFs. I mean, it's phenomenal. Lynn Nichols can help you go through that, but it's great. Anyway, the kids all had that, and I would just simply took all the readings and scanned them all. And of course, back then we had these scanners where you took one page at a time and scanned it on there, right? Unlike now where we've got the big copiers that are scanners. It took a long time, and I put the entire curriculum on my class page. So that was a great class. And then when I became upper school head, I kind of pulled back from that. And then this year, I'd been teaching European Civ since 2004 and decided I needed a break. Mm-hmm. And Matt Baum said, well, why don't you teach an elective? And I thought, good, I got the perfect one. So that's why I brought it back.
So how's that going so far this year when you brought it back and you're looking at some thinkers?
Yeah. I mean, it's
a lot of them that, from what I've seen.
Yeah. It's been phenomenal. I mean, the boys in there, I've got 3 girls in there. And then Gilman guys, I've got 14 or 15 in there, and about 5 or 6 of them at home. And then the others are at school. So, I think, one of the things that I'm proud of in many ways is that I'm not like, I'm going through the same things that the teachers are, right? I'm teaching hybrid. Yeah. I'm teaching elective. I'm teaching seniors, and so, I feel, I mean, certainly one of my philosophies is, I need to be doing what we're asking others to do. Right. I mean, I need to be able to know, like, Jake, what are you struggling with as a teacher? Right. And because chances are I'm going through the same thing. And I think, there's, you talk about philosophers, right? There's a Scottish philosopher, David Hume, who always talked about the idea that, your moral values and how you react to things are really based on your experiences, right? So, so if I'm experiencing something, right, and you're doing the same thing, I've got that empathy piece, right? I've got that piece of understanding that, hey, when Jake comes to me and says, hey, this kid is struggling, he's not doing his work, I don't know how to deal with it, right? It's much easier for me to say, well, I've had that same scenario, and here's how I did it, or the world's not black and white, right? Every kid's different. And so I think those are the important pieces here, where you can look at these thinkers and kind of use your life based on those things, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, as a leader, you have to be in some ways Machiavellian, right? I'm not, and I tell the kids that it's like, whether you're a high school principal or whether you're a president of the United States or whether you're the leader of a captain of a team, there are things that you do that might not follow the Christian morals, right, but are necessary to progress.
Right. You need everyone to respect you.
Yeah.
And
right.
Whatever that really takes.
Right.
Maybe it's morally a little bit different than, what's typically taught, but
right.
As long as you get
right.
that,
right.
that following,
yeah.
I mean, that's what's important.
Right. As he calls it, amoral realism, which is an important piece, important idea.
Who are some of the other figures that you're talking about in that course?
We've so we dug deep into Marx. We dug deep into Kant and Hegel. What's interesting is that you can't understand anything about the 20th century without learning about Kant and Hegel and the German idealists. Right, the German idealists are really important. Right now we're talking about Nietzsche and Freud and the unconscious and the what's called the irrational. Right, this whole idea that life isn't this perfectly, articulated set of steps that get you to the final product, right? That's it's not fair to man and some of his kind of inner traits that we've been taught not to act upon, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you get to the turn of the century, and you get to the eve of World War I, this tiredness and this challenge of the rational world becomes front and center, right? And so people start to act on instinct, and they act on their will, and then whole thing blows up at the turn of the century, right? When nations kind of become almost like an extension of the individual struggle with all that, right? So I see you've got Notes in the Underground, man. Notes in the Underground, which is all about this whole notion of I'm my own set. I can create my own set of morals, and nobody should judge me on those things.
Yeah, my favorite part of Notes to the Underground by Dostoevsky is when he's talking about human beings are still human beings and not piano keys.
Yeah,
and how
very famous.
Yeah, and the idea of like the rationalism and
yep.
the ideal, it doesn't fly with humans, because we're going to act out of character even when we have everything we want.
Yeah, and I think the other piece is that we struggle with, what do we really want to do as opposed to what we are expected to do, right? You hit the piano key, and unless the piano is completely out of tune, it's going to be the same note every piano you hit, right? Mm-hmm. There's this structure, and I think that what we try to talk about in class is, especially for first semester high school seniors, is think of all the things that you might really want to do with your life, but you're not able to do it. Mm-hmm. Right? You are going down this path that you may not want to go by, but there are certain expectations that you have to have, right? And you may figure that out later, right? Mm-hmm. And society doesn't always see that as progress, or they don't see that as a positive, right? They see that as someone who's drifted out. And if there were anybody like the Underground Man, right, we would look at him and we would say, oh my God, this guy's a wacko, mm-hmm. right? But he's not. I mean, he's. What's interesting is I kind of discovered this, and I see the parallels, but I kind of equated the Underground Man to Larry David from Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Right. Where Larry just doesn't care. Mm-hmm. Right. He does what Larry wants. Right. And there's a great piece in the book about spite, right? So the underground man does a lot of things that he does out of spite. And in the last series, the last series of Curb Your Enthusiasm, right? Larry starts Latte Larry's.
Yep.
And why does he do it? Because he doesn't like Mocha Joe.
Right.
Mocha Joe kicked him out. So what's he going to do? He's going to create a spite store.
Right next door.
He's going to undercut him.
He's going to beat him.
And he knows not a damn thing about how to run a store. And he's got Leon as the manager, right?
Yep.
But he's got a spite store. He doesn't care. He's happy as a lark.
Yeah.
He doesn't care if he loses money.
Right.
It's all to spite Mocha Joe.
Yeah.
Right. And then if you follow the series, in that last season, right, you've got Sean Penn starting a spite store, right?
Mm-hmm.
Animal, right? And then you've got who's the guy that does the deli? I can't remember his name. But yeah, you got, so in other words, it's great, right? It's just like, and if you follow the whole series, he doesn't care. He just says whatever's on his mind. Yeah. And he wants to argue, right? He loves that conflict.
Yeah.
Because that's what gives him purpose.
Yep.
That's the underground man.
And he's relatable, I would say. Like,
yeah.
The things that he says what's on his mind.
Yeah.
But you're thinking that too in a similar situation. You just don't say it. Larry says it.
So there's a lot of Freud in there too, right?
Yep.
He says things that most people would not say and would just be embarrassed to say it.
Yeah.
And we're all thinking as we're watching it.
Yeah.
And we're all uncomfortable as we watch it.
Oh, it's so uncomfortable.
But the person that's most comfortable is Larry.
Yeah, he loves it.
And he loves it. And he keeps doing it.
I love that connection. That's perfect.
Yeah. Not perfect, but it and I was surprised. I was surprised at how many kids don't watch Curb. I mean, I guess it's a generational thing, but as someone that grew up on Seinfeld, it's better than Seinfeld for sure.
Yeah. I don't know why, but my parents hated it. Like I thought my dad would like it, but
Curb?
he hated it. Yeah, I love Curb. I mean, I think he's, even though it's uncomfortable, it's hilarious.
You gotta have it's kind of like Monty Python. You either love it or you hate it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
I mean, I just rewatched Life of Brian the other day, and I just I just forgotten how funny it was. And maybe different parts of your life, you find things, you appreciate them more. I don't know if I liked Monty Python when I was young. My best friend growing up as a 15-year-old could recite every line of every Monty Python movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched it, but I didn't get everything. You have to have a little bit of, but now I watch it and I'm like, oh my God, this is hilarious. Maybe
it just depends on when it connects.
Yeah. Or maybe in a state of weakness, you find it funny.
Yeah. So what are you guys getting to now? Have you finished this in the class?
Yeah, we finished that. We're getting into philosophers like George Sorel and Gustave Le Bon, who were talking about mob mentality. So we're building up to the rise of totalitarianism, right? And so in order to understand, I think, why rational, productive members of society all of a sudden tap into their egos and their instinct, right? Why they do that is really important to understand, because Mussolini and Hitler and to an extent Stalin were able to convince people, rational people, that what they were doing was best for them, right? And
Dostoevsky and Nietzsche predicted that.
Yeah, and then we've, at the beginning of the year, we read a British philosopher of the 20th century named Isaiah Berlin, who talked about the idea of positive, negative liberty and searching for that utopia, right? So, Berlin says, in order to make an omelet, you got to break eggs, right? If the omelet is this peace, this utopia, people are going to suffer to get there. And if you're okay with that, well, then you're going to fall under the influence of these people that are promising you something, when in reality, it's all about them.
Was Berlin mid 19th century?
Yeah, Berlin was mid 20th century. So 1950s. He was an Oxford educated emigre from the Soviet Union who fled the pogroms. He was a Jewish family that left, I think, Kiev and went to England. But he wrote a lot about this whole notion of trying to seek the perfect, the utopia, right? And the argument is that the modern liberal state is essentially the utopia, right? That we have created this perfect modern democracy, Western democracy is the utopia. And of course, there are a lot of people that would argue that, well, not really, because Western democracy was responsible for, things like World War I, World War II, the Holocaust, the Cold War, nuclear weapons, all those things.
Right. But it's really the best system that we've found so far.
Right. Yeah, because you compare it to, those people that believe that would say, okay, well, look at what's going on in non-Western cultures, right? And they are, they still treat women the way they treat women. And, the Saudis have just, in recent years have allowed women to drive, right? And that's something the West has done, although probably much later than it should have. There is this movement now trying to enfranchise so many different people, which doesn't happen in other parts of the world that are non-Western.
And didn't happen in Soviet Russia,
Right.
Yeah, I love Dostoevsky because I just think he's an absolute genius that he was able to kind of predict this 50 years before, the Soviet Union even,
Well, he was really commenting too on the influence of kind of the West into Russia, right? So by the mid 1800s, he's that book's a reaction to this guy Chernyshevsky's book called What Is to Be Done, and what Chernyshevsky is kind of talking about Western socialism and how it's perfect. And Dostoevsky is responding. It's almost it's a rebuttal really of Chernyshevsky's book. Really lamenting the fact that so many people in Russia are giving up on Russian culture and Russian ways and the Russian Orthodox Church and embracing this Western philosophy and these Western ways that may not be compatible with the Eastern Russian way.
Right, and that crippled Russia. That idea, the Western ideas that were filtering in there all at once. Because it was so traditional and Christian, it just broke their whole belief system.
Well, it's trying to create a Western-style democracy and a Western-style economy in a country that is still 90% peasants was really challenging.
Yeah.
Right? And every time you create an industrial society, you're creating, poverty, lots of it. And when the downtrodden don't eat and they don't have rights, they tend to revolt, right? Yep. And all you need is someone to kind of inspire them, right? And this is where Lenin and the Bolsheviks came in, right? So, in many ways, Dostoevsky is challenging and predicting what's going to happen.
Yeah, sounds like an awesome class.
Yeah, well, join us.
Yeah,
we're going to read Animal Farm. We're going to read, and then we're also going to read Camus' The Stranger. So we'll get the existentialist at the turn of the 1950s.
Yeah. Are the students? How are the students doing with the heaviness of the material? Like Nietzsche, you can read one sentence of Nietzsche and talk about it for the whole semester.
Yeah. I think you have to. I think one of the ways to get them to understand it is to kind of personalize these guys, right? You can't learn about Nietzsche or some of these other thinkers we're talking about without getting into them as personalities, right? Who were they, right? What was Nietzsche's background? What was his life like? The guy had a mental breakdown and died at the age in his 40s.
40, yeah.
Right. And then the idea that his sister, who was an anti-Semite, took his ideas and kind of turned them over to the Nazi movement, to the Nazis, really kind of almost unfairly made Nietzsche kind of this, influencer of the Nazis, and which is not true, right? And when you read Nietzsche, you find that he's not necessarily talking about anti-Semitism. He's pretty much anti-religion to begin with.
Rob, it sounds like a great class. I'd love to sit in on maybe a couple of the Zoom classes. Third period's great. If I'm not doing a podcast, this is a great time.
I think we're in 218. We got room.
Okay,
come on in. You're always welcome.
Right across from the office. So
yeah, right across from the office. Right. Exactly.
So Rob, I'd like to talk a little bit about like your path and your story, and if you have some time here.
Yeah, I do.
How you got into education in general. And we talked with Beth Knapp about John Carroll, and she said you were a legend in high school. And kind of how you went to James Madison.
I did. Yep.
And pursued this as a profession.
Yeah. So I would say, like Beth, I mean, John Carroll was a really special place for me in that, I, I had a couple folks there, a couple teachers that really became kind of mentors for me. One of which taught me a ton about uh, knowing yourself and really kind of enjoying relating with kids. He was a soccer coach. He was a guy that was my teacher. But when I joined their community as a teacher in 1993 at John Carroll, he and I started. He had already created the program, but he and I spent a lot of time taking kids on wilderness trips. So we would go. I mean, we would do two trips this summer to the Eastern Shore, and we would camp at places like Shad Landing or Milburn Landing, and outside of Snow Hill on the Eastern Shore, and we would teach them about the Chesapeake Bay, and then we would we kind of evolved, and we would take kids down to the Okefenokee Swamp. We did a trip to the Adirondacks every year. We took them on a sailboat down to Key West. So these were things that I really thought that, okay, this is what I want to do. I also had a father that worked in the corporate world. And I just thought, okay, he's not real happy doing that,
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't really want to do that. Right. I wanted to be able to teach. I wanted to be able to coach because that was an important part of my life. And so I got to do all those things at John Carroll. And then, an interesting story. I mean, Boo Smith was my first teacher at John Carroll ever.
Wow.
He was my homeroom teacher.
Oh my God.
And the first day I ever stepped foot in John Carroll for a day of school, the first person I met was Boo Smith.
That's awesome.
And so he left to come to Gilman, I think, in 1999. And then 5 years later, he calls me one day and says, this was late, it's like May. He said, hey, we hired somebody. He's just decided to turn it down. We need somebody. And, I got here.
Came to Gilman, started teaching history here.
Came to Gilman, taught history, coached soccer with John Seal for from 2004 to 2009, and then 2009 I started coaching baseball and did that up through like 2017. Did you play baseball and soccer growing up, or what was the role of sports in your life? Yeah, it was baseball and soccer growing up, and so I got recruited to go to James Madison for soccer, and they switched coaches in that summertime. So, the new coach is like, hey, look, I've got the guys that I like, and I'll let you try out, but I can't guarantee it. And so I did. And he said, look, it's, you're not a different kind of player. And I said, cool. So, ended up playing rugby for 4 years, and Madison had a really, really good rugby team that, we ended up making the final 16 of the country one year. And, it was a lot of fun, and then I came home and started the process of teaching. So anyway, got here in 2004, coached, taught, and then I became kind of the upper school head of instructional technology, and started kind of thinking about how we could get some of our folks into more of the technology world. And I know Cesare's over here, and Cesare and I had a lot of conversations in the past about iPads and clouds. I mean, I can remember, Cesare and I talking a lot about cloud storage, right? And you don't know this, but we had a room, and Cesare does, where we just had stacks and stacks and stacks of storage, right? And I remember saying, well, what about this cloud? Yeah. Oh, the cloud's dangerous, right? What happens if the cloud gets hacked? I'm like, well, it's probably safer than what we got here.
Right.
So, that kind of stuff was like, we were using all Microsoft, and we had these, huge Lenovo computers, and then we just kind of eventually, broke them down, right, Cesare?
Yeah. That's so interesting. And I heard you say something on just a video I watched when you were coming to Gilman about Gilman's such a traditional place, and the balance of preserving the traditions of Gilman while incorporating the new technologies and kind of the forward moving ways of learning.
Yeah. There were a couple folks back then. I mean, I give tons of credit to Jamie Spraggins, who was always kind of front and center in all this, and
still is.
It still is. Yeah. And he would, but he and I had lots of conversations, and we still do, about, the future of technology and teaching, and so the pandemic for him is like, I mean, these are all the things that he's been talking about. It's like, well, you don't have to be in the classroom to teach these kids anymore, right? You can be elsewhere. And so, I think it definitely was a struggle, right? There definitely were early converts, and then folks who saw the benefit of it. And then what's happened is that we've got young faculty like you and others who don't know any different, right?
Like I used Canvas in college,
right.
And when Gilman said, all right, we're using Canvas and we're going home and we're teaching virtually, it was like, all right, fine. But other people, they're like, what's Canvas?
I mean, I remember, like, we had these Lenovo tablets that every teacher got, and I had the little stylus, and I was grading stuff on the stylus, and I was telling Toby Broadus this today. It's like, I was in a kick, I don't know, 10 years ago, where I was like, I'm not using any paper. I'm going to go through the whole year without paper. Every reading, every bulletin is all going to be digital. Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm going to grade they're going to turn it in. I'm going to grade it digitally, and I'm going to send it back through this thing called Google Drive. And, why use Microsoft Word when you can use a Google Doc?
Yeah.
And oh my God, you can edit it in real time, and the kids can see it. And they're like, oh my God, you don't have to like save it and rename it and send it back and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And right now, I think we've learned a lot, faculty and student. I mean, students, it's almost second nature, but especially the faculty, on how to teach from a distance with these technologies. It's so crucial.
Yeah, I mean, Jake, I don't know. I there were sometimes when you're just thinking, oh my God, are we ever going to get there? Right.
Yeah.
And Ty Campbell's predecessor, Tom Gorski, was really, in many ways, he was in a tough spot because, he had to maintain the traditionalism of Gilman, at the same time understanding that, you can't be left here. Right. And you don't have to go full bore, and, you don't have to bite off everything. Right.
Yeah. Incorporate it.
But you got to incorporate it. And people have to respect that what you're trying to do is to their benefit. Right. It's not like, and I think I said this a lot of times. We're not asking you to teach. We're not asking you to teach different stuff. We're just asking you to deliver it in a different way, right? Like, if you want to teach a novel, if you want to teach Notes from the Underground, teach it, right? But you don't have to necessarily sit in class with your books open, underline everything all the time, right? There are other ways that you can do this. Like, for example, one of the final project for that was, I had them read a passage from the last 50 pages when the underground man is talking to the prostitute Liza, who he is very empowered to destroy. And then I had them explain a passage in a video and upload the video, right?
Mm-hmm. And to some degree that takes the place of an essay or a writing assignment, because they still have to deliver their thoughts in an organized, with a hook. You got to get me interested at the beginning, and then talk me through your thought process, and then conclude it. It's the same process, really. It's just a different medium.
Yeah. And it's a skill. It's a skill that they have to learn.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's a skill that they're going to have to figure out, how to, especially in this world where, you're on a camera and you've got to think on your feet, right? To be able to have eye contact and to be able to speak clearly and enunciate, right? That's a skill that's really important in today's world. And so, I told them, look, you can have as many takes as you want. You can do it one time, or you can do it, erase it. I mean, however many times you want to do it is completely up to you. And some of you will be able to do it in one take, and others are going to take you time.
Yeah.
And that's what you guys struggle with.
And that's okay. It's the same as writing a paper.
Right.
Some people are going to write everything.
Exactly. Some people need a lot of revisions and others don't.
Yeah. I remember for my Penn final project for the master's program, I had to do a virtual presentation, and I sat in my basement for like 7 hours recording it. Nope, not good. Recording it. Like, just, it's a different type of skill that, even the kids, even as familiar with these technologies that they are, it's a different type of perfectionism if they want to produce something that looks good.
Yeah, I think, and that's the challenge, right, for teachers. It's, I think the reason that a lot of teachers drag their feet on this is because they haven't done it. They don't know. They're not very good at it either, right? And so I think there's this propensity to say, okay, well, I can do this well, so you should be able to do it well, or because I've always written my papers, that's how I'm going to have you deliver your project, right? Mm-hmm. It's the familiarity, and I think what we've got to do as teachers is say, well, wait a second, these are the new world skills. This is what they might be good at. I might not be good at it, but I need to get them to at least try it because they might use it down the road.
Yeah,
like you doing your project virtually.
Yeah,
right?
Just a little bit of both too, because I think we both would agree that it's important to know how to write and organize your thoughts and write a great paper, but it's just as important to be able to do video upload.
No doubt.
Awesome. So you got to Gilman, you taught history for a little while. You were involved with technology here.
Yep. And then, Eva Turner, the former upper school head, retired, and I had to make a decision to make, and I never thought that I would be in administration. That wasn't my goal at all in this. But I think you get to a point in your life, and everybody kind of gets to it, where they say, you know what, am I going to challenge myself? How am I going to challenge myself? Whether it's, and you do that, whether it's by running a marathon when you've never done it, or doing a podcast when you haven't done it. Like, what are you going to do? And I'd been here a while, and I'm super passionate. I mean, I love this place. It's been great to me and my family. And I saw some opportunities that, look, if I can, if I can do a handful of years and implement some things that I think maybe help Gilman get into the 21st century, then I will do it. Right. And so, I don't know how much longer I'll be in this role. I mean, I think at some point every leader has to say, look, is my message being heard? Am I able to motivate people to do what the message is? Is the messaging clear? Do I have the energy to do it? Do I have the sacrifice? I mean, those are all questions that, I won't forget Mrs. Turner said to me, I think she did this job 10 years. And she said to me, Rob, I think I may have done it 2 years too long. Mm-hmm. Right. And I mean, that doesn't mean that that's my limit as well, but I think it just means that every one of us has to look at ourselves and say, okay, right. Can I still do this effectively? Do I have the energy? And is it what's best for the school? Right. Because it's not, then you gotta step aside and let someone else who's got different ideas and different strategies.
Yep. For sure. Just knowing.
Right. And I have zero ambition of being a headmaster. That's definitely.
I was going to ask you that.
Never.
No.
I'm not going to be a headmaster. I think there are two things in a private school world that I would never be, and that's a headmaster or an athletic director. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about living in the not real world a lot of times. That's hard.
Yep.
That's hard.
What are some of the skill sets that you acquired while teaching that help you in your position right now?
Yeah, I think understanding that if you have a class of 16, you have 16 different learners and 16 different types of personalities. Mm-hmm. And I think that what gets administrators in trouble is when they try to treat everybody the same way all the time, right? The messaging can be the same, and the expectations can be the same. But I think how you manage people is really the important piece, right? Like, it's like, I think my coaching was invaluable, right? Because as a coach, and this, there are certain kids that you can really lay into, and you can say things that will motivate them, and you would never say it to another kid, right? It would shut them down, right? Yep. You learn, I won't forget, one of the individuals that I leaned a lot on in my first couple of years was Sherm Bristow. And I always remember Sherm saying, you gotta know who your bench is. You gotta know who the people are that you can rely on, right? Mm-hmm. Like who's your bench, who's your bullpen, right? Yeah. And I think you got to figure that out early.
Yeah, you have to know your players.
You got to know who they are. You got to know, if I need something done, who can I get to do it, right? Who can I rely on? Who's going to be able to, and it might not be the same person for each task either, right? Mm-hmm. It might be completely two different people that you're asking to do different things because of what they're good at. Right.
That trust part is just, I mean, we've talked on the podcast before about how important sports are for anything that you do. And having played sports my whole life, it becomes more apparent to me in the classroom and even, outside of the classroom on the impact of sports when I probably didn't know it when I was playing in high school or growing up. Like, it was just a game to me. It was just fun being on a team, but those are life skills that you're being taught.
Well, and I think you get an appreciation for how much the adults in your life care and how much of an impact they have on you, right? There were certain coaches that I was scared of, right? I didn't want to disappoint. There are others I knew that you could take a risk, and if you failed, you were okay. Mm-hmm. And you got to be able to figure that out, right? Whatever. I mean, my job and jobs of people in positions of leadership are all about, again, it's like reading people, right? And there are a lot of leaders that they don't have the instinct. I mean, instinct is really important. Like, when do you back off? When do you go at it, right? And this is the whole Machiavelli piece, right? It's
I was going to say.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds eerily like Machiavelli without without kind of the more extreme measures of it. But we're all wired differently. We're all motivated by different things, and I think if you show people you care, if you show people I think a big thing is, I never wanted to be, and I still don't, I don't think, to be a head of any division where, I'm sitting up in an ivory tower and saying, okay, you guys do it, because I'm not going to do it. Right. If I have to coach, I should coach. If I should do study hall, I should do study hall. Right. I really feel that, my main job is to make sure that teachers like you and others don't have to deal with the nonsense that comes with being a teacher in 2020, mm-hmm. right? Dealing with unreasonable people sometimes, you shouldn't have to deal with that, right? That's for me to take care of, and if I can insulate you as best I can so that you focus on your job and dealing with the kids, then that's, for me, I think, the most important thing. Mm-hmm. Now, it might reduce your life expectancy, and it may increase your need to find things to calm yourself down. But I think, it creates a happy environment, and when folks are happy and they're satisfied and they feel supported, they're better.
Yeah, for sure.
They're better.
And teachers teach better,
right.
They connect better, and they're happier here.
Right.
Because of what you're doing with everything else.
Right.
So Rob, in addition to that, and do you have to run?
I'm good.
Okay. I want to just talk about Gilman and what this place means, and mm-hmm. kind of how we are preparing boys for, for the world and an uncertain world.
Yeah. Well, so I'll start off by this story. So I got an email the other day from a student that I had my first year at Gilman, Zahir Rahman, who was in my 11th grade U.S. history class. I think he graduated in 2016. And Zahir emailed me the other day because he is, when he left Gilman, he went to Wake Forest, and he loves Gilman and Wake Forest. And one of the roles he continues at Wake Forest is looking through applicants, right? And he saw that my son was committed to Wake Forest and wanted to know if that was my son. So I hadn't heard from Zahir for a long time. And make a long story short, it turns out that Zahir is now one of two team lawyers for the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay, so he's in Las Vegas. And I think he went to law school at Penn after he went to Wake Forest. And I just thought, wow, this is what it's all about, right? I mean, I don't know. Zahir didn't come to Gilman thinking, okay, at some point I'm going to live in Las Vegas and work for the Las Vegas Raiders, right? Or that he'd get into professional football. I guess he was always a fan, but I think what's valuable about this place is that, and it's cliche, but it's very true, is that, we can't predict, I don't think, what kids are going to turn out to be when they get to, I think Zahir is probably 32 or 33. But doors weren't closed for him, right? I mean, this place opened all those doors. So, he goes to Wake Forest, he goes to Penn. I think he was probably working at another place, and he got recruited by the Raiders to work for them, right? And so, um, you know, it, this is there's so many things that these guys, can do and be, and I think that's the value of Gilman. The value is that these kids leave here and they're equipped with so many things that they don't even know they have yet.
Right.
They're not going to remember necessarily a conversation about the Underground Man, but they've at least we've challenged them to think a little bit and to get out of their comfort zone, and so maybe that helps them down the road when they're applying for that job or they're extending or applying for that position in a school. Right? They're like, okay, yeah, I struggled with this, but I'm equipped to be able to get through it.
Yeah, that wider scope of perspective here that is valuable. It might not be apparent right now to them in high school, but down the road, that foundation is in place.
Yeah, no doubt. And the people that, I think I've gotten a little more nostalgic over the last year with COVID and just thinking about some of the kids that I taught way back and what they're doing. And, I got another email about 4 months ago from a student who won. He was one of the award winners for the 10th grade artifact paper. And he wanted a copy of his paper, which I didn't have because back then they all turned in paper, right?
It was before the iPad.
It was, yeah. So I don't have a copy of it, but it turns out he is also in Las Vegas, work as a software engineer for a casino, right? So it's interesting how all this worked out because I got 2 kids that graduated who are now in Las Vegas. But I'm like, oh man, I mean, these guys, these were really good kids, and they weren't valedictorians, right? They weren't star athletes, but they're just, they're neat kids who I think took advantage of everything that they had, right? And trust me, they weren't. Neither of those guys were angels, right? They were. But it didn't matter. They still, and I think the danger is we're judging these kids too much by the fact that they're 17 and 18 years old. And that's how we view them. And that's how we see them being when they're 32.
Right.
And I think that's really unfair. But that we live in the moment that way. Right.
Yeah. Do you think the boys at Gilman or the Gilman type of boy that has gone through here has changed over the course of your time here?
I think, and I think it's true for every kid growing up, as a teenager in today's world, and that is that I don't think we have equipped them very well to deal with the adversity that they face. Now, maybe they're just more willing to talk about it than in 2004, but I can't imagine that some of the kids that well, let me put it this way: I don't remember having nearly the conversations now that back then about kids who were really struggling with mental health and anxiety and those things. I think we have created an environment for them where every decision they make is so we tell them every decision they make is so drastic, right?
Yeah.
And I think that
going to college, probably the main one.
Right. And that's why the conversation about Notes from the Underground was so important that we have, because I'm saying, look, all of you are going to go to college and all of you are going to do well, right? But that's what you're supposed to do, right? Imagine if you just said to your parents, you know what? After high school, I'm going down to Florida. I'm going to work at a bike rental place in Fort Myers Beach. Mm-hmm. What would happen?
What would be the reaction?
What would be the reaction? And maybe that's not permanent. Maybe that's just for a year or two. But even then, it's probably not even going to be accepted.
Because it's not the stereotypical standard path that you're supposed to go down.
Right. And I think that we have, but I think if a kid knew that he could do that, I think the anxiety level would drop big time.
Yeah.
Right.
And if a kid kind of had the sense of perspective that having gone through Gilman, having been at this school, knowing all the people that care about you, having your classmates that care about you and coming from, where you do come from, you're going to be okay. You're going to land on your feet, whatever it is you choose to do.
Sure. And I think that's really, we've, so getting back to your original question, I think what's happened is that we have created an environment where every decision has such, in their view, such dire repercussions, right? That we've almost paralyzed them to feel, we've almost paralyzed them to make, to really think about things, right? The decision has really already been made in some ways, right? And I think that's been, I don't remember that, and maybe it was true, maybe I just wasn't in tune with it as much, but I don't remember that from my earlier years at Gilman, where kids were just stressed out. I mean, Gilman's always been, labeled as a pressure cooker because of the expectations, and we do have high expectations. I mean, but every kid doesn't need to go down the same path, and I think we have not equipped our kids to be the problem solvers I think that they need to be. And I don't know why that is. I think it's been tough, and that's true for my own kids, right? I mean, I've got 2 kids, and I certainly, as an upper school head, I feel like I've got a perspective that's different from a lot of people, because I want them to be independent. But they're just like every other kid,
And like you said, I don't think it's unique to Gilman. It's kind of a generational product of the era, that there's maybe a couple different choices of what success looks like, and those are the only ones.
Yeah.
And
you can't fail. I mean, you can't fail. And that again, right? We always talk about trying to, we talk about in teaching, right? The way to become a good teacher is to try the things like the technology, and if it doesn't work, to figure out why and then tack in a different direction. And we're not, I don't think we've kind of created a world in which we're allowing kids to necessarily fall on their face and get back up, right? And again, it's not unique to Gilman at all. I think it's just it's the whole world. I mean, look at what happened to the high profile cases where people are bribing admissions to get their kids in because they don't want the kid to get bad news.
Yep.
Right? Yep. What's it going to do for the kid if the kid doesn't get into USC or whatever the school is? So, okay, well, we're going to soften that, and we're going to take care of it so it doesn't happen.
It's a lot of cushioning.
It's a lot of cushioning
the blow, and the best way to get good at anything is to fail.
Happens all the time.
I go back and watch the podcast, and I'm like, I said a couple times, I said a couple times, but that's okay. I'm taking note of that. I'm trying to figure out a way to make it, to deliver something good.
Joe Rogan wasn't very good on his first few podcasts either.
Rogan's the best.
And then he parlays it into a multi-million-dollar Spotify deal.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
How many podcasts do you think he did to get to the point where he could cash in on his ability?
Right.
I mean, it's unbelievable, right? His first one, you see him, he's got almost a full head of hair.
Yeah.
That's how long ago it was.
He's in his basement talking to his friends about UFC.
Right. Exactly.
And they're just screwing around.
Right. And it's true for every person in every profession. The early things are, I think about when I first started teaching at John Carroll in 1993, I'm thinking, oh my God, what were you doing? That's absolutely what we shouldn't be doing with kids, right? Is this regurgitation of all these facts, which is the worst thing we can do. And I'm thinking, why in the world would you do that? Well, you learn from it, right? Yeah. You figure it out. But you got to be willing to look back at those things. That's the problem, because when you look back at your first podcast and you hear too many likes and too many ums, and it's painful, right? And it it kind of makes you feel the way you feel when you see Larry David making a fool of himself. You get that same feeling.
It's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable, but that's part of it, right? That's the reflection piece. And I know Dan Christian, who was here a long time, and who influenced me a ton. Always, he and I always got into conversations about assessment and not assessment, evaluations, and he was always like, look, I can evaluate every class I teach, and I think you have to, right? You have to. When you're done teaching, you should look back and say, God, what did I do well? What did I do well? How do I fix it, right? Yeah. But you got to be willing to endure that pain or the embarrassment of seeing yourself and critiquing yourself. Right? That's the piece. You got to critique yourself, and it's not fun.
Yeah, and I think that's another reason why sports are so crucial and why sports are central to what Gilman is because when you play sports, you watch yourself on the screen after practice, or you're going to the film room, and you watch yourself being, doing stupid things, and the coach calls you out and tells you, look at yourself right now.
You feel bad,
but you won't do it again
because you know how you feel.
And that's how you get better.
Exactly, and you focus, right, and you realize that, hey, can't do this, and then you learn. Hopefully you learn, right? When it comes around again, you figure out you can't do it that way, right? So, there's so many good things that we do, and so many good kids and supportive parents, and but I think we've created kind of kids that are programmed, and that's going to be a challenge, right? Everything's programmed, and all the time is, you go from school to this to that, and it's all done for the benefit or for the purpose of trying to get you to that next step. Yeah. And I think we lose, I think, sense of what you learn as you go from that step as opposed to what you're achieving. Right?
Yeah. And I think maybe this situation right now could actually help to some degree in this case and in this conversation, because it's so messy right now and things are not perfect and they're not rigid and not scheduled. Yeah. That we're all learning how to, operate in the mess a little bit.
Well, it's funny you say that, because we get this a lot, certainly from some of from the faculty. It's like, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with this kid? How do I deal with this kid? And it's like, we're in COVID. I mean, and someone jokingly said, anything goes in COVID, right? And not anything goes in COVID. That's not the philosophy, but you have to take a step back and say, in the grand scheme of things, is this really the most important thing? Right? Right. It's like it's part of what we were saying earlier. It's like, focus on what you can control, right? Yep. You can't control, if a kid, if a kid's parents don't want him being in school because of the health risks, you can't control that.
Yep. You have to let it go.
You have to let it go. Right. You can't, right? If a school decides that it's okay for a kid to come, play sports in the afternoon when he's not here during the day, you can't control that. What are you gonna do? Right. Yeah. Focus and be good at the things you can control, I think, is really important, right? And move from there. And I don't really. This is certainly not the time to worry about those things that are out of your control, because it will drive you nuts, right? And there isn't enough acupuncture or deep breathing that you do. There's none of
Wim Hof breathing.
Right. There's not enough UFC matches, right, to help you cope with that if you're going to worry about every single thing that you can't control.
Yeah, you just kind of have to have the main, point, the main takeaways, right, and make sure everyone's, with you and doing their best, and that's really all you can do. Like you said, when you're trying to plan and coordinate, it's a day-to-day basis.
We may pull the plug on a day, right, and you've got this great lesson planned. You have to adjust. You can't get upset about it. It's out of your control. Yeah, it stinks. Right. But I didn't, we didn't do it on purpose. No. We're not doing it to screw your lesson up.
Yep. Well, Rob, it's been a pleasure
thanks, Jake,
to talk to you today on the podcast. Again, thank you for everything you're doing here, and hope you have a good break.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it. And feel free to stop into class one time.
Oh, I'd love to. Notes to the underground.
There you go.
Yep.
See you.
Thank you.
Thanks.